they own the country. I mean, look at this LGBTQ stuff. Do people realize why the transgender thing is becoming so big? Well, it's because it's $12,000 a month to do the hormonal treatment. So, of course, you've got these corporations pushing kids to become transgenders. It's about money. It's about the innovations. I read the other day that, these testosterone and estrogen, et cetera, went from being products that 20 years ago were selling, $20 million worth to selling $2 or $3 billion worth. It's not that our kids want to become girls or boys anymore. It's just that they're being pushed into those things by big pharma, and it's criminal. I mean, they're child molesters or child abusers. I mean, it's just insanity.
Wow. I did not know that was the cost of this sort of therapy for
and if you talk about these operations, they're mutilating their bodies. Men are cutting off their penises. Women are taking skin from their arms and making, and they're never penises, by the way. And a man is always a man. He's got XY chromosomes, and he's a man. I mean, they could say whatever they want, but a giraffe, even if it wants to be a turtle, is still a giraffe. And it's just insanity that, and don't get me wrong, I don't care what people do in their bedroom. They want to, they want to pack fudge. They want to. I don't really care what they do. It's none of my business. I love them anyway, by the way. Mm-hmm. But this whole idea that we're taking kids and giving all of these horrible drugs that are doing nothing good for them, and trying to say that this is right, we're saving their lives, which is really insane, because how many suicides are created? And then you have them doing the de-transgendering. They're going back after that, like 14% of them. I mean, is
that what
insanity.
It is? 14% of them go back?
They claim up to 7 to 14, but there's not a lot of good statistics for all of this stuff because it's all brand new. Yeah. But the other day I was reading, and they call them, and I apologize that I forgot exactly, but it's called, what do they call it when you go from one way to the other? They call it transgendering, not transgendering. There's
transitioning?
Transitioning. Then they have detransitioning.
Right.
I made a mistake. 14 years ago I thought I wanted to be a man. Now I really want to be a woman. And it's crazy. Guess what? You're born a man. That's what you are. I'm sorry, but you got to play with the cards that you're dealt. And I'm not saying you can do whatever you want. I mean, when I was a kid, I was freaking 15, 14 years old. I was with a 25-year-old waitress for like a year and a half. I mean, okay, who cares? It was one of the best years and a half of my life. I learned more from that woman than I learned from 10 or 20 women. Today they'd want to put her in jail. I think you ought to give her a medal.
I think they ought to give you a medal.
Believe me, there's some people that would like to do that, but probably in the form of a bullet. But and that's okay too. But
in the form of a bullet?
Well, look at.
Why would they want to do that?
Big Pharma.
Big Pharma doesn't like you.
Yeah, well, I fought, a company. They were a $12 billion company in 2018. Their CEO was voted the CEO of the year in 2014. He made $24 million alone in 2018. In 2020, he was voted the worst CEO in the United States. And the company today has a market cap of around $300 million.
What company was this?
Bluebird Bio. And I started my lawsuit in 2015, not knowing anything, by the way, but just wanted to get my product back rolling, and I just didn't understand what the hell was going on. And had they known that I was eventually going to last that long, they'd have killed me like they kill so many people. We have the couple, for example, that owned Apotec in Canada. They killed them about 3 years ago. I forget their exact names. Nobody ever figured out who they were.
A company in Canada called
Apotec? Apotec, yeah, and the owners were... they were killed. I mean, at one time it was, I think, 2019. I was at home and I get this weird call and it says, "Watch Michael Clancy." I'm like, "What the fuck is this?" I don't even know what Michael Clancy is, And then I go and I look at the movie. It was a movie, and it's about a guy who's going against the corruptorations, and they hold him down and they give him phosphate in between the toes so he gets heart attack, And I actually, in my book, I wrote letters right then to my children. I said, look, if I get killed by the mafia or run over by a car or have a heart attack, that's not what happened. I'm pissing a lot of people off. And most of these people are these huge corruptorations, I call them. And I call the CEOs, the modern CEOs, crazed, egotistical, opportunists, and that's just what they are. And they're destroying the country.
How old was your son when he got diagnosed with sickle cell?
So he was diagnosed with thalassemia, which is a cousin disease of sickle cell. So Arabs and Orientals get thalassemia basically, and southern Italy is Arab for the most part, genetically speaking. And he was 2.5 years old in 1992, October. And they told me that he would die by the time he was 14. He'd have to do transfusions every month or a couple of months, and it would be a horrible existence. I was lucky enough to do experimental medicine with a wonderful professor from the University of San Francisco. She today is at BU, Boston University, named Susan Perrine. And in order to avoid transfusions, because back in the early 90s there was no antibodies recognized yet for hepatitis C and AIDS. So anybody who did a transfusion, it was like Russian roulette. So I didn't want to transfuse him. So we did experimental medicine, and thank God for about 5-6 years he was on that. And it maintained his hemoglobin from where he would have been at 6.5, 7 to 9, 10. And so he was able to avoid 100 different transfusions at a time where you really needed to avoid them.
What were the signs? What were you seeing? What was going on with him? Like, what made you question something's up?
So when we're in our mother's womb and up to about 1.5 years, we have what's called gamma globin gene. And it's the fetal hemoglobin. The hemoglobin transports oxygen all over our bodies. And then when we get to be about 1.5 years, that turns off, and the adult hemoglobin turns on, and that's the beta globin gene. The problem with sickle cell disease and thalassemia patients is that they have a defective beta globin gene or human adult hemoglobin gene. So as a consequence, these poor sickle cell disease patients was slightly different because they also have a problem that their blood cells sickle in shape, and they get these horrible strokes and the pain. And by the way, it's mostly ignored in the United States. And a lot of the reason it's ignored is because there's so much money in treating the 100,000 patients that are out there. They estimate that there's, it costs $150,000 a year for all of these hemoglobin or all of these sickle cell disease and thalassemia patients. So there isn't always a big push to get a cure. The same thing in cancer. And I'm certainly not trying to say, they've got a cure to everything, and that's not the case. But as was said about me back in the 2000s by one of the top CEOs back then, I believe was Celgene, and he said, Girondi, he can't be that intelligent. He's trying to cure a disease. The money's in treating him.